Hello once again, I'm Ronnie Millett, and thank you for joining me, and welcome to this edition of Our Man at Westminster. As ever, my producer is Jeff Schiffeldrin, and we are Radio JCOM, broadcasting on 1386 on the medium wave and on the internet at www.radiojcom.com. As usual, our man is Fabian Hamilton, the MP for North East Leeds, and now a shadow Labour spokesman on the Treasury bench. Today we will be talking mainly about health matters. Let's go straight to it. Fabian, you recently went to open visit a dementia unit run by a Bupa.
Yes,
that's a little unusual for a Labour MP on Bupa.
Well,
tell us about the dementia first.
Well, I mean, dementia is a problem that's afflicting us at the moment. Too many of our older people are afflicted by it, and it's a terribly tragic thing. I suppose I first confronted it when one of my constituents came to see me. Gosh, it was a good few years ago now, in great distress because her husband had developed Alzheimer's disease at age 59, an age I'm rapidly approaching. He was a big chap, and she could no longer cope with him. She couldn't physically cope with him, get him to sit down, get him to lie down, and he didn't know where he was half the time. It was the most upsetting thing, because it's like watching somebody you love disintegrate before your eyes over a period of months. You know, they're there physically, but they're not there mentally, and their personality changes completely. And this man became quite, not violent, but quite sort of aggressive when he.
Yes, I understand that is one stage of it.
Yeah,
so he was still sentient. He could still reason. Yeah, but his personality changed.
Yeah, his personality changed, and I found it the most distressing thing. She was so dignified, actually, and so wonderful. I was so upset about what was happening to him that I actually introduced an adjournment debate in the House of Commons.
Tell us what's an adjournment debate.
An adjournment debate is a chance for backbench MPs to raise a subject, any subject, of interest to them or their constituents, and to have a minister answer that debate. So you speak, it's usually half an hour at the end of the day, hence adjournment, and you speak for 15 minutes and the minister responds for 15 minutes.
That's a long time.
Yes, it is quite a long time, but we had a lot to say in this particular case, and I'm glad to say the then Labour minister was pretty helpful, although not a lot has changed. This is a looming time bomb for us, I think, in our society, in a lot of Western societies. What are we going to do, and how are we going to pay for people who really fall prey to this terrible affliction?
Well, yes, I mean, as you possibly know, I've been interested in this as well, and I would call it an epidemic.
It is an epidemic, and that's why when Bupa invited me to go to their care home in Roundhay, in Park Avenue there, I agreed to do it. Not strange for a Labour MP. I mean, Bupa is part of the web of care that we have, both private and public.
Well, let's talk about Bupa in a minute, because when I looked at the press release, I found something very interesting that we'll discuss. Yes. But how are they dealing with dementia?
Well,
because it's not just Alzheimer, is it? There's a whole range of
no, that's right.
Shall I say, mental afflictions and deteriorations related to ageing.
They have some remarkably wonderful people, actually, who work in the care homes. Very well qualified, perhaps some not so well qualified. They bring in musicians, somebody to play the piano. One of the things apparently that will help people with dementia, or some people with dementia, is music, and trying to hark back to musical tunes that they remember from their youth. Or
you mean, as Shakespeare said, music that soothes a savage breast?
Yes, I think that's right. I'm not saying that these are savage people, but there's something terribly wrong has happened to their brains and their personalities, and it's music that will bring people back and allow them to perhaps remember that they're human beings. So that's a good thing. I think enormous patience as well in just trying to remind those afflicted, that they've got to eat and how to actually eat the food that they've got in front of them and what they might like and dislike. So it's really is back to basics for a lot of people who are afflicted with dementia. They're almost in a childlike, almost sort of baby-like state, not quite knowing who they are or what they want to do, and not remembering anything. That's the worst thing. But very often short-term memory goes completely, but long-term memory, remembering your childhood or remembering the war years or whatever, that's still there. So it's quite a strange thing.
Yes, I liken it to a computer where the memory disk is full up.
Yes, that's right. No more can be stored.
No more can be stored. Yeah. I mean, the problem is that from the statistics I looked at, the ratio of working people, and this is what it amounts to,
Yes,
because
indeed.
people have got to be supported,
Yeah.
now is about 61 working people to one person suffering dementia. That is almost halved
Yeah.
in the next 25 years. That's not just because the dementia increases, but of course the working population
That's
goes down as
absolutely
well.
right. Yeah, we're an ageing population. Yet, when you go to places like Turkey or some of the Middle Eastern countries, the ratio of young to older people is much, much bigger. So, in countries like Turkey, I think it's half the population's under 25. It's quite remarkable, which is in fact one reason why they should join the European Union. But we won't go there.
So, I mean, what's the answer? Because what we're really talking about, if I can be quite cruel, you've been to visit a situation where the bucket's being tipped over,
Yes.
and there's a tsunami coming.
Yes. Yes, I think that's right. I think that's right. And I don't know, I have no idea what we do about it, to be honest. I've no idea at all, because, we're not, heaven forbid we should do anything drastic. We're a civilized society. We want the best quality of life for those people, in spite of the terrible thing they have to endure for the rest of their natural lives. And I don't know how we deal with it, except by funding it, by the most remarkable and patient people that we employ to actually help those.
Well, we need a culture shift, I think, don't you?
We do need a
Amongst
culture shift.
people
Yes, we
generally.
do. Yes, we do. We need a culture shift, but we need more people to come into the caring professions and therefore be treated decently by the caring professions, which is going to cost us all a lot more money.
That's right, unless we're all involved in it as a voluntary thing. I
Yeah.
mean, there was a report earlier this week or last saying that the government needed a wake-up call because
Yes.
they didn't realise that the wave of care that was needed, dementia being one aspect,
Yes.
that was going to be needed, and it was being planned for
Yes.
in health and economics development.
Well, that's very true. I mean, right at the tail end of the last Labour government, our then Health Secretary, currently Shadow Health Secretary Andy Burnham,
Good man.
very good man, announced and introduced the National Care Service. And he said, in the future, this will be as important as the National Health Service and needs to be funded in a similar way, because we are facing a care time bomb, not just dementia patients, obviously frail and elderly people who...
This will ring bells with a lot of our
well,
listeners.
50 years ago, they wouldn't have lived beyond maybe 75, 80. Now they're set to live till they're maybe 100 or more.
Yeah, I mean, there's a related issue. For my generation, you love your parents, you love your children, but you're giving support to your children and your grandchildren and your parents as well.
Yes.
And you become a shock absorber from all
Yes.
pressures from all directions.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Yes, yes, that's true.
So let's talk about Bupa, because in reading the press release, I thought, oh, Bupa, well, that's for middle class and upper they're just a nice finance organisation providing a reasonable health service, but it's a money-making job. But I'm not right, am I?
No, you're not. It's the British United Provident Association. That's what it stands for. And they are a non-profit making body. Sorry, let me rephrase that. They are a private sector organisation in the health service that reinvests every penny of profit they make from their activities.
So there's no shareholders.
There are no shareholders, no. It's a provident association.
And there's no dividends paid out.
No dividends paid out. They're not quoted on the stock exchange. I mean, you remember the Provident Associations
Yeah,
and the
it's like a
Friendly
mutual
Societies?
building
It's like a
society.
mutual, exactly, yeah. Yeah, and that I think stands them apart from some of the commercial private healthcare companies. So that's why, I was quite happy to go there. I think they're a very good organisation.
That's very interesting, because their marketing and their advertising does not indicate that that's the case.
No, it doesn't. No, absolutely. But I'm not here to promote individual private organisations. I'd rather see high quality care done by local authorities and the National Health Service. Let's be honest here, but it needs to be good. And I think with the service that Bupa are providing, what's important is their patients, their residents are getting a first class care. And any organisation that does that and is not trying to make money for shareholders out of it is okay in my book.
Well, yes, you don't want a monoculture
No, you don't,
in
no.
in the provision of healthcare. You
No.
want a variety.
That's right.
So, but that wasn't the only thing. You went to the opening of a stammer prevention
Yes, I
clinic.
did.
Tell us about that.
Well, interestingly, it's a strange thing. I didn't know much about this till a couple of days beforehand, when I found out that Mr. Speaker was coming to my constituency.
Yes, I want to talk to you about him in a moment.
And I was a bit shocked, actually. And then I realised that coming with him was Ed Balls, the man for who I'm now working, I suppose, or as part of his team. And what I had never known was that Ed Balls was a stammerer. And he was really, really interested in trying to fund and support centres that help children overcome stammering, children and young people.
Right.
And this was at the new Regional Centre in Chapeltown. So I had the Speaker, John Bercow, there. I had Ed Balls, the Shadow Chancellor, and me as the local MP. It was inspiring.
Really?
We heard from young people who'd always suffered, and thanks to this centre, had actually overcome their stammering.
How many people there?
There were about 60 or 70 people there. A lot of them were users.
60, 70.
Yeah.
And this is located in your constituency?
In the Regional Centre on Chapeltown Road, the new
Right.
NHS centre there. It's absolutely brilliant, I have to say. It's the last thing the Labour government did in my constituency, and wow, it's terrific. I do 2 surgeries a month there.
Well, maybe that might have happened if it had been a Liberal or a Conservative government.
I doubt it.
You doubt it, really?
Well, I doubt it, because they weren't investing that kind of money in facilities within the NHS.
Right. So what do you make of Mr. Bercow?
Well, he's interesting. When I was first elected in '97, he was the new Conservative MP for Buckingham. Majority 10,000. This is in '97. No Tory had a majority of 10,000. He was the only one. He was aggressive, very right wing, a bit of a sort of attack dog, if you like. Always talking in the House of Commons, always attacking Labour MPs, and he became much, much mellower as time went by. We became quite good friends, because his father's Jewish, his mother isn't. And, there aren't many Jewish MPs, and his identity is as a Jewish person. His mother converted.
One gets the impression he's his own man.
He's absolutely his own man. And over the years, when he then got married to a member of the Labour Party, his wife, Sally.
Goodness me.
Yeah, exactly. We realised the transformation was complete. I think he's a brilliant speaker, frankly. And that's not just because I'm trying to suck up to him. I think he's absolutely great. He's really brought back the reputation of the Speaker of the House of Commons where it should be. And I think he controls the debates very well.
I get the impression he's in the grand tradition of
absolutely.
Of speakers. He's known as his man. He's fair to everybody.
Yes, he's absolutely fair to everybody. And I really think he's done a remarkable job. I'm very, very impressed. He's scrupulously fair, balanced and even-handed.
Nice. If you need to contact Fabian to discuss this or any other matter that you might wish to, he's at fabian@leedsne.co.uk, or you can phone his office, 249 6600. That's 249 6600. All this information and much more can be seen on the website, which is www.leedsne.co.uk. So we've talked in the past about the seamy side of Britain, the seamy head, which is the banks. But let's talk about the seamy underbelly, Fabian, about loan sharks.
Yes.
Well, we'll come to that in a minute, but you've been involved, or you've commented on bogus claims for injuries in car accidents and this sort of thing.
I mean, actually, Jack Straw's led very well on this, the former Foreign Secretary, Home Secretary and Lord Chancellor. That's quite a list, isn't it? Jack's very good, and he's obviously a man not to be bored on the back benches. So he brought up this issue of the way that car insurance policies are being inflated by some of the bogus claims that it's proven have been made for example, neck injury or other injuries that never really happened following car incidents or accidents. Now, that's not to say that there aren't people who suffer from whiplash, from serious car crashes and when one vehicle goes into the back of another. That certainly exists, but it has been grossly inflated and exaggerated, and some of the payouts have actually forced policies to go up in price for you and me.
Do you think you're being fair there?
Well,
but do you think there are many bogus ones?
I haven't seen the evidence that Jack's seen, but I know from what I've read that there certainly are many genuine claims. There's no doubt about that, and there are people who receive really appalling whiplash injuries. But there are others for whom they get a neck ache for a couple of days, but actually there's a kind of conspiracy to stretch that out a little bit to gain the compensation as a result. Because after all, it's only the insurance company that's paying it out. It's not you or me. It's not the taxpayer. It's not any private individual.
Well, of course we are paying it out because we pay the premiums that
yes,
pay
we
this.
know that.
Yeah.
We know that. But the attitude is it doesn't really matter because the insurance company, you're covered for this, so you might as well make the most of it. And
I agree with you, and I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you because I'm aware of neck injuries, which are very strange, that people can have a shunt in a car,
yes,
and they don't feel anything for 2 or 3 weeks. And then suddenly it builds up, and they're stuck with it for 2, 3, 4 years.
Yes.
Where I do agree with you, I'm aware of cases where it's been something like that, and the payout's been a couple of thousand, but the real expense has been all the so-called professionals toing and froing, fee building, and like the legal charges are 2-3 times the payout.
And the accident compensation industry really has grown exponentially, hasn't it? I mean,
yes, indeed.
You only need to watch daytime TV to see the endless adverts for, have you slipped on a supermarket floor, or did you fall over in the street because the local authority didn't maintain the pavements, as well as, the accident compensation culture. So I think, we do. The difficult thing here is to clamp down on the bogus and false claims and the organisations and individuals making money out of other people's pain, and the genuine compensation for the pain suffered as a result of an accident. It's what worries me is this culture of blame. It's always got to be somebody's fault, and blame culture, I'm afraid, leads to exacerbated and increased professional fees and therefore costs for everybody.
That's, if I'm not being patronised, but it's unusual to hear a politician voicing that view, because it's sort of a moral, philosophical view.
Well, it is, but, look, I travel quite a lot, and I know many of your listeners will have travelled and do travel. And when you look at other cultures and other societies, you realise that ours isn't the only way of doing things, and isn't necessarily sometimes the best way. And I do think we need to bring back a little bit more responsibility for ourselves.
So you want a responsibility culture rather than a blame culture?
Yes, absolutely. I think we need to look at sometimes things happen because it's nobody's fault. Yes, I was upset last night, for example, that my train was delayed 2 hours, but some poor devil was killed. And
tell our listeners about this.
Well, I caught the 5:33 train from King's Cross to Leeds, hoping to be back in time for my constituency meeting. The train was due to get in at 10 to 8 in the evening. Unfortunately, the train was slightly delayed because it was delayed arriving in King's Cross. We set off, and then just outside Grantham, some poor devil had jumped off a bridge there and landed in front of the train. The driver had killed them, obviously, as an accident because the person was trying to commit suicide. Wasn't the driver's fault. The train came to a stop. Police were called, the ambulance and emergency services called, and our train sat in a field for 2 hours. Now, you can't blame anybody for that. I'm not going to blame the poor devil who thought that he or she wanted to take their own life. It's just a terrible thing. But sometimes things happen for no purpose or reason. They just happen. And the idea that it's always got to be somebody's fault, I think is crazy. And I think we need to get away from that. Because that then generates, the blame culture generates the legal fees and the legal costs and the litigation. And it isn't always necessary or productive. Sometimes perhaps we should look to ourselves and say, actually, was I driving carefully enough?
Indeed.
Did I look clearly? Did I spend enough time looking right and left and making sure there was no vehicle coming?
And at the end of the day, a payout isn't necessarily a recompense.
Well, very often it isn't, for the pain and suffering you undergo. If you slip on the floor somewhere, is it the local authority's fault that they haven't maintained? If clearly there's a piece of paving stone that was up and shouldn't have been there and there's no warning, well, that's an obvious thing. But if it's something more nebulous, more difficult, more indistinct than that you slip because it's wet, is that somebody's fault?
I agree with you. And I think many of our listeners, if they think about it, would agree with you as well.
I hope so. But, companies that feed on the back of this and say, did you slip in a supermarket? Maybe they can pay out money to you if you put in a compensation claim. I just don't think we should be doing this. I really don't.
That's an interesting thought. Moving on to this slightly, they announced today that they were going to try and crack down on what they call payday loans.
Oh yes, now this is
the same sort of sleazy underbelly, isn't it?
Well, this is. I really do think that we should put a cap on the maximum interest that can be charged on any kind of loan. I mean, that's what it boils down to. My colleague, the new Labour MP, a young woman, Stella Creasy, has done a lot of work on this in the Commons.
I've seen interest rates of 2,100% or something.
I think it's criminal, frankly. I mean, it's daylight robbery. Let's bear in mind that in Muslim societies, usury is actually a crime. You can't charge interest. And let's go back to the days of Cromwell, when actually the Puritans ruled that usury shouldn't be allowed. Therefore, you can't charge interest. Now,
although, to be fair, usury was understood to be excessive interest.
Excessive, exactly.
Yes.
And I would say that these payday loan companies are exploiting people in a vulnerable position who know they're going to get paid in a week's time, but haven't quite got enough money to make ends meet that week. And therefore, they go to these companies, they borrow £200, but the interest is another £200 sometimes, if they don't pay it back quickly. And often they can't pay it back quickly, so it's compounded.
Do you think in focusing on our economic crisis, which actually is a materialistic crisis, we're missing other areas of concern and interest that we ought to be looking at as public matters?
Well, I think the willful exploitation of people who are in a tight corner because the economy is shrinking at the moment is quite criminal. And a lot of the companies that prior to the crisis that just went round some of the council estates or some of the poorer housing areas, knocking on doors, selling loans, whose APR, annual percentage rate, was sometimes in the thousands, i.e. a multiple of 10 of the original loan, which if you're borrowing for 3 days is one thing, but if you're borrowing for a year is just outrageous.
Yes.
I think they just should be criminalised, because I think it is a criminal form of criminal activity.
Fine. So, talking of people under pressure, let's go right round the houses again to Greece.
Yeah.
What do we think of what's happening in Greece?
Ah, well, dear, oh dear.
Mr. Treasury Man.
Where do we start? Look, they should never have joined the euro for a start. We know that they lied their way into the euro, and that alone should be grounds for excluding them. I think ordinary Greek citizens are suffering appallingly badly because of the way their governments have behaved over the years, and because of this dishonesty. In the end, Greece...
You put it as strong as that, dishonesty?
Well, that's the evidence that we're getting. That
I have to say I've heard the same
story. In
the
negotiations for joining the euro, there were dishonest statements produced by the then Greek government. Now, I don't want to cast aspersions to any individual, because obviously they wanted to be part of the European experiment, the euro experiment. But it's clear when you're trying to unite a whole load of disparate economies into one single currency, you have to have some unanimity of productivity and wealth and gross domestic product within those nations. And you can't do it otherwise. Otherwise, we end up in the situation we're in now, where Germany, the most productive and profitable economy in the whole of Europe, almost the whole of the world, is actually subsidising all the weaker economies, and that can't be right.
And on that note, again, food for thought, Fabian. You do it very well for us. Thank you very much. You've been listening to Meet Your Representative. I'm Ronnie Millett. Our producer is Jeffrey Schiffeldrin, and this is Radio JCOM, broadcasting on 1386 medium wave and on the internet at www.radiojcom.com. Thank you so much for listening, and Fabio, thank you for spending your time with us.
It's a pleasure, Ronnie. Thanks.